So now to add the methods that we need to implement so that our buttons work, let's go ahead, open back up our code, and let's identify what we need to add. We've got get all houses. We need to add our button delete house. We need to add our, anywhere we have a button, add room, and then down here, button, or DOM manager delete room. So let's go ahead and do this. Static. Let's start with this first one, which is delete house, and it will take one parameter, which will be the house ID. So we're going to go ahead and say static. Delete house is going to take an ID. And in here, we're going to use the house service again, because we already have the delete house method created in this house service. So house service dot delete house, we're going to pass in the ID that gets passed into our delete house method in our DOM manager, because the delete house method in our house service takes an ID as well. And then we're going to use the handle the promise. So dot then, we're going to create a function, pass a function into here, and we're going to say return house service dot get all houses. So what this means is once we delete a house and it comes back that it's been successfully deleted, we want to go ahead and get all the houses again, and then once we get all the houses, we want to render those houses again. So houses, pass them back into the this.render houses method. So we delete a house, then we send another HTTP request to get all the houses that now exist since we've deleted one, and then we re-render those houses. So let's see if that works. We come back in here, refresh, and let's delete this. We'll delete this house with 2 rooms. So if we hit delete, looks like it's gone, and we're good. If we open the this up, look at our network. Let's do this. Let's delete this one. Hit delete. We see that we sent a delete request right here. That was a delete. 200, it was okay. And then we sent a get. The delete, we sent this house, or that's the response. There's the payload. In the delete, we sent this house. And I'm missing the ID. The ID is somewhere in the payload. I'm just glancing over it. But then we sent a request and got back, well, there's only one house now, and it's this one, that Flower Manor right there. So that's working. Let's go ahead and, since we only have one house to work with now, let's go ahead and implement the create new house method so that we can create more houses to test out the rest of this. So inside of our DOM manager, we're going to create another method called create house. This is going to take a name, and from that name, we're going to go ahead and say house service dot create house. We're going to pass in a new house and name, and again, our house class has a constructor that just takes a name. So we're creating a new instance of house with that name. So we'll pass that in here, and then we're going to handle the promise that comes back. So then we're going to say return house service dot get all houses. Again, you should recognize this from the pattern of our last one. Once we create a new house, just like when we delete it, we basically want to re-render all the houses. So we're going to send another request to grab all the houses from the API and then render those houses. So if we save this, let's test it out, refresh this. Let's create a new house. My new house. Create it. Something didn't happen. So let's go ahead and take a look at our console. Hit this button again, network. It's not working. So let's go ahead and take a look back at the code for this. We can even inspect it for now to see what's going on. And nothing there gives anything away. So we'll come back to our code here, and this should be on the create house. Ah, yes, for this we need to actually add some code outside of here because that button isn't defined in our JavaScript. It's defined right here as the create new house button. So let's come here, and before we get all houses, let's go ahead and grab this new house button. New house, is this what we called it? The button was called create new house. Alright. So here we go. Come here, grab the create new house button. Click. And pass a function into here. And when we click it, we want to call the DOM manager dot create new house, or create house, and we want to pass the value in from here, and that's the new house name. So we'll go ahead and say jQuery, and we call that new house name. And just to double check, we come back to our HTML. We've got our create new house, and we've got our new house name. So perfect. So we've got the new house name dot val, so the value of the new house name. Then we're going to go ahead and set that back to new house name dot val. We're going to set it back to an empty string, just for a good user experience. So let's go ahead and refresh this. There's my new house. And there we go. We got my new house back. If we look at our network, we can see we sent this my new house, post, get, we got everything, and this was cleared. So now we can create houses and we can delete houses. Now we need to be able to create new rooms and delete the rooms as well. So let's go ahead and add those methods. Back to our code. Alright, let's go ahead and start with adding a room to a house. So static add room. It's going to take an ID, and we're going to go ahead and iterate. This is why we have this static houses up here, because we want to be able to find the house that matches the ID that's passed into and create the add a new room for it. So we need a loop through to find the house. So for let house of this dot houses, so we're looking at each house in our houses array. If the current house we're looking at has the ID that matches the ID we passed in, then we're going to go ahead and say house.rooms.push a new room, and the room constructor takes, let's take a look at it here, the room constructor takes two pieces of information, two parameters, name and area. So we'll come back down here, and where are we going to get the name and the area from? Well, the name and the area are going to come from this right here. This is the add room button. So here's the name, and here's the area input fields. And so their ID is whatever the house ID is, dash room name, and whatever the house ID is, dash room area. So we can come back up here and we can use that. And we can go ahead and say we're going to pass in using jQuery. So we're going to go $, parentheses, and all these, there's like a lot of symbols here right next to each other. It might get confusing. Just remember which each one represents. This is our jQuery method. So we open it with parentheses. Then we're creating a template literal, so we have the back ticks. And then, just like using jQuery, we're finding something by ID. We need this pound symbol. And then we want to, we want to use or interpolate a real JavaScript value into here. So we've got our $, and curly braces, just like we do in any template literal. So that value is going to be the house dot underscore ID. And then outside of this, we're back to just the string part of our template literal, room dash name. And then we want to get the value from this input. So that's the one. And then I'm going to go ahead and copy this, because it's basically going to be the same thing for the second parameter, except for it's going to be the room area. We'll go ahead and add our semicolon there to end that. So we're going to push a new room to the rooms array on that house that we found. And then we're going to go ahead and call our house service.update house, and we're going to pass in the house that we just found. So we're basically taking that house that we just added a new room to its rooms array, and we're going to send an update request to the API to basically save this updated data, the new data that represents this house. So we're going to go ahead and here, again, sorry, we got to get rid of those. We call this dot then, we're going to handle the promise. What are we going to do? Same thing we've been doing. We're going to get all the houses and re-render them once they've been updated. There we go. So we should be able to add a room now. So let's go ahead and test out that feature. Refresh this. We've got this. Let's create a new house. My new house. Create that. Let's add a room. Room 1. 400 square feet. Add. And there we go. We added the room. You can see that the request here was an update, which was a put, and then we retrieved everything, and then we re-rendered the entire DOM. Again, not the entire DOM, just that div, that app div that has all of our houses in it. Alright, so let's come back here. Let's go ahead and we need to be able to delete a room, right? So if I click this, I still get an error that delete room is not a function. So let's go ahead and write that functionality. Static delete room. That's going to have to take a house ID and a room ID. We need to know which house we're going to delete the room from. And we're basically it's going to be another update on the house. So for let house of this dot houses, if house ID is equal to the house ID that was passed in, then we're going to loop through each room and identify the correct room. So for let room of house dot rooms, all the rooms inside the current house for this iteration, if room dot underscore ID is equal to the room ID. Again, that underscore ID is the ID that's assigned automatically by the database that the API is using. So if we find the right house and the right room, we're going to go ahead and say house.rooms.splice house.rooms.index of the room we just found, and we're gonna splice out that one element. So we're going to remove that element from the rooms array. Then we're going to do what we've been doing. This part should look really common. House service.update house. We're going to pass the house in. And we're going to handle the promise. And we'll say return house service dot get all houses, again to re-render everything that's new. And we're going to handle that promise as well. Dot then all the houses into this dot render houses. There we go. So let's see if we refresh this, if we're able to delete a room now. And it looks like I have a spelling error. Instead of index of, I have index or. On line 93 index of, and I can see that over here, line 93. Let's refresh, click delete, and it did delete, and it was successful. Alright, and we can delete houses, we can create new houses, we can update it, and we can delete them. So that is all the functionality for our full CRUD house application.